had done what I set out to do. It wasn't a grand spectacle. No shouting matches or angry confrontations. It didn't need to be. My revenge was quiet, calculated, and oh so sweet. Hello. My name is Maya White. I'm 32 years old, from Chicago. Get ready to dive into a tale of betrayal, revenge, and the price of justice. This story will keep you on the edge of your seat. Before I continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy the story. I love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The train station was nearly empty. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their sterile glow casting an eerie sheen over the polished concrete floors. It was late. Too late for most people to still be hanging around. But not too late for me. Still standing, waiting for Willie, my husband. I stood alone in the cold, my breath visible in the frosty air. A light dusting of snow had started falling outside, but inside the station, it felt even colder. My coat, an old faded black wool one that used to feel comforting, was no match for the bitter chill that seemed to seep in from every crack of the building. My boots, once new and sturdy, were now scuffed. I could feel the weight of the cold seeping into my bones, but I didn't move. Couldn't. I checked my phone for the 5th time. Still no messages. Still no calls. The screen stared back at me blank, just like the space around me. He said it was a joke. Those words echoed in my head as I stared at the station clock on the wall. It was almost mocking me. The seconds dragged on, as if time itself was in no hurry to let me go. I had been standing here for over an hour. Over an hour waiting for him. He had promised, "Wait here, I'll be right back." That smile of his, playful and warm, as if nothing could ever go wrong. But nothing went as planned. As I stood there, shivering in the cold, the only thing I could hear was the steady hum of the air conditioning and the rhythmic tapping of my boots on the cold, polished tiles. He never came back. I glanced up at the clock again. It was almost 2 hours since he was supposed to return. 2 hours. But nothing. The train station was even quieter now. The last few passengers had come and gone, and I was left standing in a place I once thought of as comforting. The station, now devoid of people, felt almost suffocating. The lights flickered as if they were struggling to keep up with the emptiness of the room. I stood still, trying to fight the sting in my eyes. I had hoped this wasn't what I thought it was, but deep down I knew. I had felt the signs before, the little comments, the offhand remarks, but I refused to see it. His jokes had always been a part of his charm. But now it felt like an insult. He knew what it meant to me, but he didn't care. Why didn't I leave? It wasn't that simple. You don't just walk away after giving someone everything. I didn't just give him my time. I gave him my trust, my faith. And for a moment, as I stood there alone in the darkened station, I questioned everything. I had given up so much of myself to be with him, to support him through thick and thin, never asking for anything in return. I believed in him, in us. But now I realized I had been foolish to wait. Stay with me. This isn't just about waiting in a cold station for someone who never returned. It's about the slow unraveling of a love you thought was unbreakable. It's about the betrayal that cuts deeper than just being left behind. It's about what happens when you finally stop waiting and decide to make the world yours again. If you've ever been left behind, abandoned, or betrayed by someone you trusted, you'll want to hear what happens next. This is where everything changes. Like and subscribe because you won't believe how this story unfolds. Trust me, what happens next will shock you. I stood there not just physically waiting but mentally processing everything that had happened. The reality of being abandoned hit harder now than it did in those first moments. I thought I had given Willie everything. But I was left with nothing. And yet, that was when the shift began. The moment I realized that waiting, hoping, and begging for Willie to come back was never going to bring me peace. It wasn't about that train station anymore. It wasn't even about Willie anymore. It was about me and the decision I needed to make. Was I going to stay in the past, or was I going to take control of my future? The next morning I woke up with a fire inside me. Something had clicked. No more tears, no more longing, and no more false hopes. I had to rebuild my life, but this time it would be for me. I started small, paying attention to things I had neglected in my relationship, my career, my friends, my health. I made lists, goals, little things I could do to take back my power. I remember the first time I treated myself to something I hadn't allowed in years, a weekend away by myself, without his permission. Felt like freedom. I never asked for thanks, for love, for appreciation. I just wanted respect. And now I was going to give it to myself. For the first time in years I could breathe freely. I didn't have to apologize for my feelings. I didn't have to make excuses for the things I had given up. It was time to reclaim my— He thought I was weak. He thought I was the girl he could leave behind, and I would just stay waiting. But the more time passed, the more I realized I had been the one holding all the power. Not Willie. And that was when I realized something crucial. I wasn't doing this to show him anything. I was doing it to show myself what I was made of. I was reclaiming my strength, my confidence, and my worth. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. The days began to blur together, and yet, each one felt like a step closer to something I had never imagined for myself. I no longer recognized the person who had stood at that train station, lost, heartbroken, and waiting for someone who would never come back. Instead, I was becoming someone I could be proud of. Someone who was no longer tied down by the past. It was a slow process, but every day I could feel myself getting stronger. The fire inside me didn't just burn away the hurt. It ignited a new version of myself. I wasn't sure where it would take me, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to stop now. I didn't need a grand plan, not yet. But something told me that if I kept moving forward, kept improving, kept taking steps toward the life I wanted, I'd eventually get there. So, I focused on the little things. Small victories, personal achievements. Each moment of clarity brought me closer to the woman I was meant to be. I began to make decisions that were for me and no one else. I signed up for that class I had been too afraid to take. I redecorated my apartment. No longer a place of memories with him, but my space. My sanctuary. Felt like an act of defiance, but it also felt like freedom. Every step I took felt like shedding another layer of my old self. I wasn't just transforming emotionally. I was transforming practically. I started putting together a vision of who I wanted to be. Independent, powerful, unstoppable. And the more I focused on that vision, the more everything in my life started aligning with it. I took up running to clear my mind. Little by little I began working out. My body was changing, but so was my mindset. I was starting to see results, not just in my body but in the way I approached everything. Nothing felt out of reach anymore. The doubts, the insecurities that used to hold me back. Slowly they started to fade away. And then one day I caught myself smiling. Not because of anything or anyone else, but because I realized I was happy. I was in control. I was living for me, and it felt damn good. I had spent so much time building myself up, brick by brick, that it took me a while to realize something else. I wanted him to see it. I wanted Willie to understand what he had done. Not because I needed him to feel sorry for me, not anymore. But because I wanted him to witness the very thing he thought was impossible. My strength, my independence, my success. I wasn't just going to live my life in silence. Willie needed to know the woman he walked away from wasn't the same person who had been left behind. I was different now, and I was ready to make sure he saw that. I knew I couldn't just walk up to him and demand answers. No, I was going to do something far more satisfying. I was going to show him. Not with words, but with actions. With the life I was about to build. And this time it wasn't going to be a joke. So I started planning. I wasn't just a woman healing anymore. I was a woman preparing. I started making a list. A list of everything I had to do to rebuild my life, on my terms. I was going to make him see what he had thrown away. I dove into my career. Every morning I woke up early, worked long hours, took on projects that scared me, that pushed me beyond my comfort zone. Each victory, no matter how small, felt like a step closer to the woman I was about to become. I reconnected with old friends, people who reminded me of who I really was before I got lost in a relationship. I surrounded myself with people who celebrated my growth. I didn't need his approval, but I wanted myself to be proud of the woman I was becoming. And as I began to build, I also began to see the cracks in his world. The people he'd lied to. The promises he'd broken. I started to find out things about him. Things I had never known while we were together. And each new piece of information gave me a sense of power I hadn't felt before. Willie thought he could walk away from me and never look back. But I had just begun to scratch the surface of what he had left behind. I wasn't just taking action for the sake of it. I was being strategic. Every decision I made, from the way I dressed to the people I interacted with, was part of a bigger plan. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I was learning to manipulate the situation in my favor. It wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. Well, I was strategically building a life so successful, so fulfilling, that it would eat at Willie from the inside out. He would see the woman he thought he could walk away from. He would see how wrong he was. But this time it wasn't about getting back at him in some childish, dramatic way. It was about outgrowing him, becoming someone he could never have. Willie thought I was weak, but he had no idea who I was becoming. I made my first move without even realizing it. It was subtle but powerful. I didn't have to do anything extreme. I simply started living my life in a way that he couldn't ignore. The more I stepped into my own power, the more he began to notice. I didn't seek him out. He came to me. I got a promotion at work, something I had been working toward for years. My social media, once dormant and hidden, became a reflection of my success, filled with photos of me traveling, going out, living. At first, it was subtle. He'd glance away when our gazes met, pretending he wasn't watching. But the longer I stayed in that space, the more it became clear. He wasn't sure how to process what he was seeing. I wasn't the woman he had left behind. I was something else now. The most satisfying part wasn't the success I had achieved. It was the fact that he was now the one left wondering what he could have had. I could see it in his eyes every time he thought I wasn't looking. The recognition, the regret, and it felt damn good. As the night wore on, I could feel his presence following me from a distance. I wasn't engaging him, not yet. He didn't deserve that. But I knew that he was watching, probably from across the room just out of my sight. I could feel his eyes on me like a weight. I made my way to the exit with a quiet confidence, knowing that he was there, still stuck in his own thoughts. But I wasn't stuck anymore. I had moved on. As I stepped outside, I couldn't resist taking one last look back. Sure enough, there he was, standing by the door watching me walk away, clearly unsure of how to react to the person I had become. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I kept walking, not for him but for me. Because I had finally realized. He was just another person from my past. And that's exactly where he was staying. It had been months since I'd seen him. Months since the night at the event, where I could feel his eyes following me. His silent acknowledgement of what he had lost. But I hadn't heard from him. No apologies. No attempt to make things right. I figured I'd never see him again. I didn't need to. But life has a funny way of surprising you. I was out one evening with some friends, laughing, enjoying the night. It was my night, my world now. But then I saw him. Again. I couldn't avoid it. He was standing near the bar, looking more out of place than ever. His posture was stiff, eyes darting between me and the group I was with, but I could feel the tension in the air. He had seen me, and I could see the confusion and disbelief in his eyes. The realization had finally hit him. I wasn't waiting for him anymore. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight up to the bar, keeping my back straight, my head high. I knew he would try to come over. I knew he would try to say something, but I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. Not yet. "Hey," he finally said, his voice shaky. It wasn't the confident tone I remembered. It was tentative, unsure. "It's been a while." I turned to face him, finally looking directly into his eyes. He stood there, shifting on his feet, looking like he wasn't sure how to approach me. I couldn't help but notice how different he looked now, like he was trying to catch up to something he could never have again. But instead of anger or frustration, what I felt was calm. Control. "Yeah, it's been a while," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You know, I never thought I'd see you again. You never reached out, never tried to apologize for what you did." He shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting. I don't know what to say. "I wasn't." "Don't bother," I interrupted him, my tone firm but not harsh. "I don't need an apology. I don't need anything from you." I gave him one last look, a quiet smile of finality, before I turned away. There was no anger, no bitterness in my heart. Just peace. "Goodbye," I said over my shoulder, my voice calm, steady. "I hope you find what you're looking for. But you won't find it here." As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on me. But this time I didn't feel the need to look back. I had already left him behind. I'd made sure that the life I was building wasn't just something he could ignore. It was something that he couldn't escape. As much as he tried to move forward, he was now living in the shadow of the decisions he made. The first taste of ultimate justice came when I signed the lease on the apartment across the street from him. It wasn't just about proximity. It wasn't about rubbing it in his face. No, it was something deeper, something more poetic. I had taken everything he thought he could leave behind and built a life that couldn't be ignored. Every time he looked out of his window, I would be there, living my life. And I knew that seeing me, thriving, would be a constant reminder of what he had thrown away. I didn't tell him about the apartment. I didn't need to. He would find out on his own, just as he had found out everything else. The news would spread as it always does until one day, he'd look out his window and see me, walking down the street, heading to my car, laughing with friends, completely unaware of the impact it had on him. He would see me living the life he thought I couldn't have without him. The life he never thought I was capable of. And that, right there, was my ultimate justice. I didn't need to confront him. I didn't need to hear his apology. I had already moved on, but the life I built was the proof that he could never take away what I had become. And there, in the quiet of my new life, I realized something even more powerful than revenge itself. It wasn't about making him regret what he had done. It was about how much I had grown, how much I had become. I wasn't the same woman who had stood at that train station 5 years ago. I was someone who was stronger, wiser, and more capable than I ever thought I could be. The true victory was that I had built this life for me, not for anyone else. I was no longer living for his approval, his validation, or his love. I had created a future that was entirely mine. And that was more than enough. I woke up one morning and realized I didn't feel the anger or bitterness I once thought would consume me. I wasn't waiting for him to come back or apologize. I had already moved on. I had found peace in my own growth, my own success, and my own happiness. The life I had built wasn't just about revenge. It was about showing myself that I was capable of so much more than I had ever given myself credit for. I knew this chapter in my life was over. He had thought he could break me, but he didn't know. I was stronger than he ever realized. If you've ever felt like you were left behind, abandoned, or betrayed, this is your story too. You have the power to rebuild, to create a life far beyond anyone's expectations, even your own. Don't let anyone make you feel small. You have everything it takes to rise above. Trust me, your story isn't over yet. Subscribe now for more stories of betrayal turned into breakthroughs. Because sometimes the family that matters most is the one you choose after the one you were born into lets you down. Until next time, keep growing. Thank you for following my journey. Please subscribe and turn on notifications. I can't wait to share more of my story with you. Until next time, stay strong and stay free.